Hi, this is Mr. Adler, and welcome back to Ciencia on Fuego. Hi, this is Mr. Adler, and welcome back to Ciencia on Fuego. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that may seem small, but it's pretty important: the microscope. The microscope was actually first invented over 400 years ago by people living in the Netherlands. Some of the most famous early users of the microscope were people like Antony van Leeuwenhoek, who's the father of microbiology for discovering really, really tiny organisms that live in pond water. Or Robert Hooke, who was the first person to use a microscope to observe cells. But these machines are actually pretty complicated, for a good reason. Microscopes allow us to magnify objects. To magnify means to make larger. Think about what a magnifying glass does. You can use it to make objects seem bigger to your eye. A microscope takes tiny, tiny objects, microscopic objects, and makes them seem much larger. Micro, that prefix, means tiny. Scope is something you can look through, so a microscope lets you look through it and see tiny things. Now, here are the parts of the microscope. First up here, you have the eyepiece. Every compound light microscope, and that's what this is, has an eyepiece and objective lenses. And you can actually see there are 3 objective lenses. I have a red one, that's my low power, my 4 times lens. I have my yellow, my medium power, my 10 times lens, and then I have a blue. That's my high power, my 40 times lens. Those are how many times it magnifies what I'm able to do with just my eyes. Now the eyepiece, it has a magnifying power of 10 times. To get the magnifying power of the entire microscope, you multiply the power of the objective lens you're using plus the power of the eyepiece. So actually the strongest this microscope gets is it will let me see things 400 times the size of what I could see with my eyes. 400 times larger. Not so small anymore. Now I've got my eyepiece and I've got my objective lenses. Let's keep going down the microscope. Now this is the stage. Just like if you were at a play, actors act on the stage. If you're using a microscope, you put what you want to see on the stage. We'll get there in a minute. You can also see I've got some nice clips that help me actually keep my sample on the microscope stage. I've also got these focus knobs. As I turn the focus knobs, the stage comes up and down, which lets me bring my objects into focus. 2 more. This is the diaphragm. As I turn the diaphragm, I can let more light in or less light in, depending on how much light I need to see my object. And finally, of course, it's a compound light microscope. I need some light. Some microscopes actually work with a mirror to reflect light, but ours just has an on switch that lets light come in. Now, you know all the parts of the microscope, but it's time that we actually look at something. We can't just put things on the stage by themselves, then they would stay on the microscope. They could ruin the stage. They could ruin the space where light comes up. You make slides. These are microscope slides. They're made of glass, usually, and they're about this long. Here, I'll show you. This is a microscope slide. When I use it, I try to hold it by the edges and not by the center because I don't want to get a fingerprint on my slide. Otherwise, when I try to look at my sample, I'm just looking at my fingerprint, and that wouldn't be so interesting. Now, I need to put my sample on the slide. Pretend I wanted to look at sugar on the microscopic level. I happen to have some sugar right here. Now, I don't need a lot because I'm just going to zoom in so far that I'll only see a few grains of sugar. So I'm just going to take a teeny little bit, barely anything, and put it on my slide. Now, you're about to make a special kind of slide called a wet mount slide. Wet mount slides need liquid to make it easier to see our sample. In the case of sugar, this is pretty easy. All I'm going to do is take a dropper, take just a couple drops of water, put it on top of my sugar, and that will make it easier to see. There's one more step in making our slide. When I move my stage up and down, I don't want those lenses to hit sugar, then I'm going to ruin my lens. Plus, I want to flatten out my sample to make it easier to see. So, on top of my sugar and my water, I'm going to put a cover slip. This is so small you can probably barely see it, but it's a teeny glass square. I'm going to take my glass square, lean it on top, drop it over, and there we go. I have a wet mount slide. Now, I put this on the stage of my microscope and make sure my sample is directly over where the light comes in. I always remember to turn the light on so that I can see my sample. And I always start on that red low power. I bend down, I make sure there's enough light coming through the diaphragm, and then I zoom in until I can see my sample. Now, the cool thing about sugar is if you zoom in to this level, where 40 times what you can see with just your naked eye, I can actually see individual crystals of sugar. This looks kind of like crystals, like maybe diamond crystals, except they're sugar on the microscopic level. Now, if I want to see it even more close up, I can turn to the 10 times objective lens. Now I'm seeing things at 100 times stronger than what I can see with my eyes. Zoom in again. Whoa! I can see those sugar crystals even bigger. One more time, I'm going to zoom into the highest power. Now I'm seeing 400 times stronger than what I can see with my eyes. I use my focus knob, and I'm actually zoomed in so far that I'm just looking at one corner of one sugar crystal. This microscope is letting me see things I could never see with just my eyes, and that's what's so special about microscopes. That's what let us use microscopes hundreds of years ago to discover unicellular organisms, living things so small they're only made of one cell. Speaking of cells, I'm going to try to make one more microscope slide. I'm going to turn off my microscope for a minute, unclip my slide, and now that I've seen something non-living, my sugar, I want to take a look at something living, me. Now, I won't fit on this microscope stage unless I want to break it, and I definitely don't want to break my microscope, but I can take a sample of my cheek. Here's how I'll do it. I'm going to take a toothpick, and I'm actually going to scratch the inside of my cheek. Not very hard. I'm not trying to look at blood cells today. I just want to get a small sample of what's inside my cheek. So I'm going to do this for 10 seconds. Sorry, it's hard to count with a toothpick in your mouth. Forgive me. Now that I have a sample at the end of my toothpick of what's inside my mouth, I need to make another microscope slide. Let me get another one. Remember, I always pick these up by the edges. I'm going to put it down carefully. And in the middle of my slide, because I'm making another wet mount slide, I need to put another drop of water. Perfect. And I'm going to swish the end of my toothpick that was in my mouth on that drop of water. I'm now transferring what the sample was that came from my mouth onto this microscope slide. Now, the things that are in my mouth are actually really hard to see, and I won't be able to see it with just water. So I'm actually going to use another liquid in my wet mount slide, this blue dye. Putting my blue dye right in the middle of my slide, and I only need one drop. It's very strong dye. So I'm going to take one more cover slip, pick this up, and tilt. And there we go. I now have a sample of what's inside my mouth ready to look at under the microscope. I'm going to take my slide, put it down, make sure my sample is right in the middle, and remember what I said last time, we always start on low power. Turn on my light, and let's see what I can bring into focus. I turn the focus knob and, oh man, there's definitely something there. I can't see it really well though. What am I going to have to do? I need to go to higher power. I'm going to turn to my 10 times slide, or 10 times objective lens. Now I need to bring this back into focus. Oh, it's getting closer. I can see the objects much clearer, but I want to see them even closer. Going to my final lens, my 40 times lens. Oh man, and now I can see these things that were inside my cheek really close up. There's actually a name for these things. These are my cells, the smallest part of me that can be considered alive. All living things are made of these. But if you want to learn more about these, we'll have to start again another day. For now, I hope you have lots of fun with your microscopes. See you soon.